And we were talking about, way back in the day when you got married, you knew someone's family, their grandparents, maybe even their great grandparents, and you knew that person for their entire life because maybe that was one of three available men in your little town. Now you've got 1,000 men sitting in your pocket, and it just gets weird. You can't. Welcome to the Dustin Sanchez TV Lawyer Marketing Show. Today I have a special guest, Attorney Daryl Longworth, family law attorney out in Houston, ex-police officer, second career attorney, and he's got a very interesting story. Let me just bring him onto the show. Here we go. Hey Daryl, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Doing very well, thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, no problem. I want to get right into it with this fast fire question. What is the problem that marriage is the solution to? You're a divorce attorney. You must see hundreds of marriages dissolving a year. And I don't know, marriage has gotten strange in today's culture, specifically with the internet. And so I just want to start with this semi-serious question. What is the problem that marriage is the solution to?
What is the problem that marriage? People, I think initially they reach out, loneliness, and then, the marriage solves that. You have some companionship. So those are the problems that it's solving initially. People think they're in love. They don't maybe know what love is, but those are the reasons why the people are getting married.
Do you think it does a good job of solving those problems?
No, I don't know that it does. Unless you know your spouse, it's kind of hard to just jump into a marriage just for those reasons. Just because you're lonely and somebody's with you at that time, are they the right person to marry? That's hard to tell, unless you really know the person. So I think a lot of people will meet somebody and they lose that loneliness and they think they love them, but they don't spend enough time to really get to know them. And then they get married. So it solved the problem for a short time, but then it made more problems later.
Yeah. How long do you think you should know someone before you get engaged or get married? Or how long should the engagement be? Yeah. Say you get engaged. Should you already know someone before you get engaged, or do you know them then get engaged? What would be the process that would maybe solve all the divorce issues we're having today?
Sure. I think that you can't really put a timeline because each person, each couple is so different. However, if it depends where you are in your life. If you're at the beginning portion of your life, there's going to be a lot of changes in your life. You may not know who you are or what it is that you want. So how is it that you expect to find a partner or a spouse if you don't even know who you are or what you want? So somebody in that position should take a lot more time than somebody who's maybe a little more mature. They may even have a checklist of everything they think their spouse should have. And if they know themselves and if they know what they want, then the time that before you get married should be a lot shorter because you already know. And if that person checks all those boxes, then it should be okay. But remember, people can fake being something for a while, but after, 3 or 4 months, it's hard to fake who you are after that time. So, if you've had that much time and you're mature in what you're looking for, then you're probably good to go. If not, I might spend a little more time and find out who you are, more importantly.
Yeah, that's a good point, that you can fake who you are for a while. I was talking with my sister today, and we were talking about marriage because I was telling her I had this podcast coming up. What are some questions I should ask? And we were talking about, way back in the day when you got married, you knew someone's family, their grandparents, maybe even their great grandparents, and you knew that person for their entire life because maybe that was one of three available men in your little town. Now you've got 1,000 men sitting in your pocket, and it just gets weird. You can fake being who you are. Anyways, you talked about checklists. I got a checklist here as well. And one of the things it says, get a bio from Attorney Daryl Longworth. So tell us about yourself and how you got into family law. Tell us the your backstory.
Sure, it's a kind of convoluted story. In my undergrad, I got a degree in theater, and I was an actor, and I was waiting on tables and doing some bit parts here and there, trying to decide what it is I want to do with my life. And then I decided, oh, the heck with that, I'm going to join the police department. That's what my father did. So I joined the police department and doing that for a while. And then I got to be around a lot of people, around their strained relationships. Police officers deal with a lot of situations prior to divorce taking place. There was a lot of disturbance calls out I was in the city of Houston. So you're going out there dealing with people and you get familiar with these situations. But those are the same people that end up in CPS too, because they're fighting and arguing in front of the children. So not only are they going through divorce, they're going through CPS. So I got to experience all of that firsthand as a street officer. And then, it's a funny story about being a lawyer. I'm thinking, okay, I've got 4 kids and I'm on a police salary. How am I going to pay for college for 4 kids? So I thought I better look for another career. And I told my wife, I always wanted to be a lawyer. I said, what the heck? I'll go take the LSAT. Won't study for it. I'll just take it. And then we'll see what I get. And then I took the LSAT and we said if I got a certain score that I would apply for a law school. Well, it turned out I was fortunate enough to get that score. And then I applied for law school and got in. A funny story, though, about the LSAT, since, I was just doing it just to do it. It was interesting to take the test and sit back and watch other people while they're taking it. The younger people, so serious. They had hoodies on, they had little timers on, they had every little thing. So it gave me a different perspective being older, going to law school. And then going to evening classes, that was fun too. It was a nice variety of people, different walks of life, different backgrounds. So that was a lot of fun. But during that time in law school, I really liked family law because that's what I saw on the streets. And one of my professors who taught that, I really looked up to him when I was taking that class. So I went ahead and got a job clerking for a family lawyer. And that's really when everything started, because I did over a year with them. And when I got out of law school, I just said, that's it. I got to do family law with all my police experience, all my experience working for somebody else. So that's how I ended up doing family law. I did both jobs, believe it or not, for 8 years. And then when I got in my 50s, I said, no, my body can't do this. I can't work all night and go to court all day. So about 5 years ago, I stopped working as a police officer and went full time as a lawyer.
Well, that had to be extremely stressful because I know being a police officer is stressful. And I talk to family law attorneys every day who are just like, I can't do this anymore. And I can't believe you did both of those jobs at the same time. Crazy.
I guess I'm a glutton for punishment. I picked 2 jobs where usually people don't like you that much. It tends to be the people in Houston like the firemen better than the policemen. And then when it comes to lawyers, they definitely don't like family lawyers either. So I like to choose professions where I'm just on a quick talking to somebody. They're not going to really like what you do.
Man, I just got off the phone with an immigration attorney and he was saying people just hate immigration lawyers. Well, what attorneys are liked?
Well, I guess the one handing you over a check, if you've got a civil attorney helping you, maybe you like them then, but I don't know. I mean, I guess lawyers are not well liked overall. I think that would be a fair assessment. So I guess that does cause a lot of stress for people who practice in law.
Okay, well, I'm glad you came on, and I wanted to have another family law attorney because I'm just fascinated with the dating culture today and how we treat marriage. Marriage is supposed to be a sacred thing, right? But some years back, we started getting married on reality television shows. Let's bring 40 women competing for one man who's a millionaire. Oh, but he's actually a construction worker who's not a millionaire. And let's get married. And it's like, this is how we treat marriage today. And it's getting strange out here. So I just thought, like, I want to bring someone on who deals with failing marriages all the time and get their insight here. So you are that unlucky person who's going to just answer all these questions you probably weren't expecting to answer. But let's start by talking about successful marriages. Who's
Yes.
more likely to stay married? And specifically, are people who get prenuptial agreements more likely to stay married than people who don't? What do you think about that?
I think that really has no bearing on whether you're going to stay married or not. It does give you a little suspicion, I think, for the partner who's signing that, that does this person really love me, or why are they doing this? So, but overall, I don't find that people signing that get divorced more than other people. Definitely, um, a marriage is work. It's a partnership, and it may not be 50-50. It's taking care of the person who needs something right then, so one person might be getting more than the other person. So I find that relationships, marriages, if they've had a good role model growing up, if their parents were married for 50 or 60 years, if they have family members or friends in the family group have been married that long, that's a good role model to look at. And if you look at marriage as work, not something, what can this person do for me, but what can I do for them? I think it's important for people to know that you're going to have to work and you're going to have to sacrifice for this other person. It's not all what they can give me. And if you look at our website, we're Christian attorneys, and I think that being part of a church with the family and working that foundation also assists marriages to last longer. It's not something that's going to be guaranteed, but all those factors together, I think, make a marriage much stronger.
Yeah, I like that. I like that you point out how it's work, but also the mindset, kind of this giving mindset. What can I do for this person as opposed to what can I get out of this marriage? Uh, and honestly, I thought you might say people who got prenuptial agreements tend to stay married longer or have a more successful marriage. But from your perspective, it doesn't really make much of a difference. Is that right?
No, no, and then I find that the ones that I represent in these who've signed one of those are trying to figure out a way to get out of them. There's only a couple ways to do it, so it's difficult, but they do try to get out of them.
Uh, would you say that prenuptial agreements are becoming more common with this younger generation?
I would not say so. I think that they're more common with a spouse who has a lot of money, maybe family money. And since we hear about divorce being so prevalent, that they're a little concerned about giving all of their money to somebody else who they might not be married to for a long time. I think those are the people getting those prenups more than anybody else.
Okay, yeah, that's where I find myself actually. Whoever I marry is immediately going to become there. And big, it took me 20 years to get to this point. Now all that's at stake. And I feel that burden of, should I address this whole prenup issue? What if things don't work out? And I know I hate to think that way. I hate to be planning, what if things don't work out? But then when you hear all these statistics, 70% of marriages are unhappy, 50 something percent of marriages fail. And it's like, I don't know. Is it even prudent to talk about a prenup, or is it just something you don't agree with? How do you feel about, what are your thoughts towards, should people get prenups?
My personal feeling is I don't believe in them. That's not who I am. However, from my lawyer brain thinking, somebody in your situation, you've built your empire, and you're doing well for yourself. So in that situation, I think it's okay to safeguard yourself and move forward. I hear a lot of people saying, I did this because I loved them, and now I'm getting, pardon the expression, now I'm getting screwed. I heard that yesterday, as a matter of
Mm,
fact. So a lot of people make decisions because they think they're in love, and those turn out to hurt them if they get divorced in a couple of years. So it's okay to get a prenup and think about, well, what is my salary going to be moving forward? What is my retirement going to be after we get married? Everything you're bringing in, like in your situation, that's your separate property, and that's not part of the community estate. However, you'll accumulate stuff during the marriage because of all the work you've done in addition to what you've already have. And that portion, some of it could end up being community. Your business would stay separate, but you're still getting income and putting money away, maybe in a retirement or something. So you might want to protect that and get that done.
okay, yeah, good insight. One more question about prenuptial agreements. How effective are they in court? You said there's difficulty in getting out of them. You think, how effective are they when things go bad?
I think they're very effective because as long as you follow the rules that are in place and you both have lawyers, you've both done a full disclosure of all the documents that you have, all a financial accounting of everything. Then you haven't held anybody under duress and you haven't committed any fraud. So it's likely that a premarital agreement like that would hold up in court. Because really you're only attacking it because things were not disclosed properly, or you were held under duress. So it's a really high burden to try to get out of these if they're done properly.
Okay. High burden to get out of them if they're done properly. That gives me some comfort. I still don't know if I can't imagine ever bringing that up to someone I was thinking of marrying, but it is something I think about all the time. What is the worst divorce case you've seen, whether you've been a part of it or maybe a partner or an associate had one? What's the worst divorce case you've seen?
Well, I would think that I wouldn't point out a particular case. I would point out a set of facts that are completely horrible. A lot of people like to use their children as pawns in a divorce, and they just want to hurt the other person, but they don't know that they're hurting the children too. So I think it's important for couples that are getting divorced to think about the kids. Think about what you're doing to the kids. It's a lot of trauma to go from being with your parents to have to go to different homes. So don't make it any harder on them by trying to use them as pawns and saying bad things about the other person, trying to talk them into doing something for you. Involving your children is a bad choice, definitely.
Yeah,
But
what is that? Oh, go ahead.
and I also was going to say, there's situations where it doesn't matter if it's the man or woman who's the victim, but there's a lot of people who are abusive. So you're dealing with marriages with abusive people. That's particularly tough on the family, the children, and the person being abused. I find that most times it appears the women get abused more than the men, but there are men who are also being physically, mentally abused by women. And people suffering from that, and makes a lot of trauma going through the divorce. But we're all grown-ups moving forward. It's the kids who are the innocent victims, I believe. That's why I pointed them out first.
Yeah, that brings me to mind a topic called parental alienation. I see that term a lot on TikTok and on social media. I see men complaining about this, and I see women complaining about this. Does that exist in Texas? What can you tell us about parental alienation as far as family law?
Sure. I mean, there's a lot of cases where the wife or the husband, both, they don't like their spouse and they try to keep the children from them. In Texas, we're lucky, where if you are not the custodial parent, you're not the one who's the primary parent, you get very liberal visitation. And that's the statute. And the burden is on the other side to prove that you don't deserve it. So if there's a case where you're having your access restricted, you need to get in court right away and have that ordered. It's also a serious problem if they're trying to alienate these children by putting bad thoughts in their head. And these children could have bad feelings towards the other person because of what the person they spend most of the time with is putting in their head. And that's not good for the children either. I've had cases where judges have not looked kindly on the spouse who was putting these bad thoughts in these children's head, causing them to not like the other parent. And I've had rulings go against somebody who's tried to alienate another person when the judge was well aware of what was going on. It didn't turn out good for that person in the courtroom. So it is a real problem. You need to stand up for your rights, either going for the full custody if you think it's appropriate, especially if somebody's trying to play mental games with the children. It might be in the kid's best interest to pursue that custody, because if they're doing this to them, what else are they going to do wrong to them? And then at least get into court sooner than later. That way you can get court-ordered visitation from the court, and the other person can't interfere with the visitation. They just will play mental games still with the children.
Okay, because that is the context I see it in online, is the children who's now 30 years old complaining, I just had a relationship with my father or my mother, and now I'm realizing through my whole childhood, my mom or my dad was making all this stuff up about my other parent, who's actually a good person, but he or she just didn't want to fight it or never went to court. I don't know that people even know that there's a remedy for that if you're experiencing parental alienation, and you say get into court sooner than later. What's the process? Do you like call an attorney and tell him about this?
Yeah, I mean, you would
Or
want to call an attorney regarding this, but it's usually related to some kind of action, other action in court, whether you're married or not married. It's related to a divorce. It's related to, they call it a SAPSR, suit affecting parent-child relationship, where somebody gets to be established as the father to a couple that's not married. You have those same issues. And while you're in the process of doing that, you need to pay attention to this alienation. When I say get into court right away, I mean file for temporary orders so that you can get the visitation. And then more importantly, I think if you believe this is going on, you would ask for a court-ordered therapy so that the children can go to therapy with the parent who's doing the alienation and who is being alienated. That way, maybe they can work through this. So we don't have somebody who's 30 years old saying, gosh, my other parent said all these bad things and they were lies. If all that doesn't happen, what I like to tell my clients, you be true to yourself. You always be there for your children. And guess what? They're going to grow up and they're going to know that what was told about you is not true, because they're going to see through your actions. And then your relationship is going to get better later. You just have to get through this period of time if you're not getting help from the courts or you're not in some kind of therapy to help get through this.
yeah, that's a good point. Just be true to yourself, and I guess in the end, the truth will come out. Um, because you experience, I imagine, I don't know how many divorces a year you see. It's got to be at least 100 or so, but you probably have some insight into what are some of the problems with marriage today. Like, and that's what I wanted to ask you. What do you think is the problem with marriage today?
I think it goes back to what we were talking about before. People not really knowing who their spouse is, people not willing to sacrifice for the other person. A lot of people are selfish, self-centered, and they're only looking after their own interests. Well, that marriage isn't going to work. And let's remember, a few years ago, I think the buzzword was cancel culture. So it's easy or people just would quit and not say anything, just quietly quit. I think people are taking that same kind of feeling and they're applying it to their marriages and not willing to do the work. And they just cancel the marriage. They just want to get out of it without having to do the work. And a lot of times, if they had done the work in the beginning, maybe they wouldn't have married that person to start with. I also see, unfortunately, I see another issue where somebody's been married 20 or 30 years and the kids go away and then they're stuck with just each other and then they don't like each other anymore and don't want to work on it. I've seen that happen quite a bit too.
That's a good point. What is the work? Like you say, had they done the work in the beginning, what is that work? Like, what is a good practice for someone like me who's thinking of getting married? What should I be doing?
Sure, you need to first identify who you are, and then you need to develop a checklist of what attributes are you looking for in a spouse. We're all different, so these checklists are going to be different for each person. And then in your case, you might have a checklist of 10 things that you want this person to have. Well, they may only have 5, but darn, they sure are nice looking and you sure are attracted to them. So you might forget about those other 5, and then all of a sudden you're hooked up with them, and then those other 5 rear their ugly head down the road.
Okay, that's a very you know me very well. Well, how do you think social media has affected marriage and divorce?
Well, I think social media is really affecting divorce in a negative way, especially if you're married and you feel like your marriage isn't so spectacular. And then you're looking at your friends who are posting all this stuff, going to dinner, going on vacation. And guess what? Like I said, it's okay. It's easy to fake who you are for a while. And it sure is easy to sit there and smile and pretend like you're happy when maybe you're not. And all these other people are seeing this, thinking that your relationship is so special. And then they feel bad about their own relationship and may cause conflict. So I definitely think social media is bad. And just to give an example of this, I love this story with my wife and I. We were on a trip and I was saying, let's go hiking up this little hill. Well, it was pretty steep and she didn't have the right footwear, sorry, for that kind of hiking. And she was a little bit mad at me during that hike. And then when we got to the top, there was a cave, and we went in the cave, and everybody got around for a picture, and we're all smiling. So it looks like we had a great time. Well, I'm the only one who enjoyed the hike.
That's hilarious. But that's so true, because I have friends, I can log on to their Facebook right now and find the picture. So honored to have married my soulmate, still alive, and they're divorced. That marriage isn't even, they're not married anymore, so people do fake their life on social media, and there are people who are getting jealous of their friend's fake life that isn't even real. Yeah, that's a good point that you bring up. And then just like you on that trip, you and your wife probably weren't, you weren't getting along extremely well at that point in time, but they pull out the cell phone and everyone's like just happy as can be.
Yeah. Fortunately, I was forgiven shortly thereafter, but I did apologize because it was a bad choice on my part.
Yeah, I hear you. Okay, so let's talk about who generally, or who in your experience as a divorce attorney typically files for divorce first. But before you answer that, I want to say, being an attorney myself, I know there's a difference between who left the marriage first and who files for divorce first. Shed some insight on that. Who leaves the marriage first? Who files for divorce first?
Usually it depends. And I'll say that, maybe a spouse is out cheating on the other one and they want to start a relationship with this new person. So they'll be the one to file the divorce fast. And when I say they, I really mean their other relationship, the one that they're cheating on their spouse with. They may be pushing them, and I've heard this before, pushing them to hurry up and file and get through this divorce so that they can start their relationship. I find that a lot of people, even though somebody's cheating or they're having hard times, they want to try to work on it and not do it. But it gets to a point where a spouse can only take so much abuse, and then they're going to reach out and ask for help. The people who file the fastest are the ones, if there's kind of drugs involved or some kind of physical violence. If the children are in danger, you can't expose the children to that danger. So those people are the ones who file the fastest. And the reason why that happens is if somebody's doing drugs around you and your children, and you're allowing your children to be around them, somebody may call CPS, and then you get the children taken away from both of you. So I think that people are aware of this, and they know that they need to be proactive and go out there and file for that divorce to try to protect their family.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense, especially in those emergency situations. In terms of, I know same-sex marriages are becoming more popular, but in terms of men married to women, are you able to identify any kind of a trend? If you go on all of these red pill YouTube shows, they're all saying that women file for divorce 80% of the time. And I don't know that tells the entire story, because it could be maybe the husband was cheating and then the woman filed for divorce. But are you able to identify any kind of trend in your experience where men file for divorce first most of the time, or women file for divorce first most of the time? What do you think?
In my practice, we're about 50-50 for men and women that we represent. So I haven't looked at the trends as far as breaking it down, looking at the records. I can only talk about who calls my office and who we represent. And I would say we're pretty equal in who we represent, men and women. So it's not that different. I do believe in a lot of cases, like you're saying, the women filing because the man's stepping out on them and they can't take it anymore. That does happen quite a bit.
Well, how do you feel about the statement that opposites attract? Is that true? Do opposites really attract, and does that make a good marriage?
I think that is a true statement, but I think that that is not something that can make a good marriage. I mean, remember when we were talking about knowing the other person, knowing what you want, and knowing, what you're looking for. If the person is completely opposite than you, then there's always going to be conflict. So I'm not sure that that's the best idea, unless you're a really giving person and each of you are sacrificing, letting the other person, do some of their stuff as well. I think it makes it more difficult. I think it's easier to stay married to somebody if you're like-minded, because you have like goals, you're looking forward to the same things moving on through your life, and then you work as a team to achieve those goals. If you're opposite, then you're working against each other, and that definitely could cause more conflict. I would always advise being more like-minded, getting married, and have a better chance of staying married.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I knew of a couple who were big into politics. One was conservative, one was liberal, but they didn't have children. And they seemed to have a great marriage, but I always thought to myself, that might be harder if you have children, because you have children and you probably want to pass on your political thinking, maybe, or your life. And it just seems that liberal versus conservative, you're always going to be fighting, trying to teach your children these things. Is it harder? You said it's easier to be like-minded and stay married. Is it even harder when there are children involved?
Oh, the children make it much harder because, then we go back to, well, he is not helping me out enough. He's not changing diapers. He's not feeding the kids. He's not taking them to the doctor. Or it could be the dad doing all the work. I don't want to stereotype it, but typically, I find in most of my divorce cases is that the mom is the one doing more of the work as far as the school work or the going to the doctor. So when people don't feel like they're working as a team and they feel like the other spouse is taking advantage of them, making them do all the work, that causes a lot of strain on a relationship. So let's take a relationship where we already had conflict. Now we add children to that. That's going to create even more conflict.
Yeah, obviously, this might sound dumb, but for a while I was dating someone that smoked cigarettes. And in the back of my mind, kind of like what you were saying about, she was super hot. So I just stayed dating with her. But in the back of my mind, I always thought, like, one of the things I want to teach my children is to live a healthy life and not smoke. And how would I do that if mom was out on the porch smoking a cigarette while I'm giving them this lesson? So I think there is something to, it's easier to establish a healthy marriage with someone who is like-minded.
But if you go into it with the right attitude and you are opposite and you're willing to not make it into a fight or an argument, and that you can still have a good marriage. It's just a lot more work, I think.
Yeah. Well, how do you prevent your spouse from cheating on you? How would anyone prevent their spouse from cheating on them?
Well, the problem is we can't control what the other person is thinking. I mean, you have marriages where they appear to be happy. They go out on dates. They are intimate with each other, but then somebody just reaches out. Advice I like to give for it is to build high fences. Because let's be honest, I work mainly by myself, so I don't have this problem. But let's say you're working for an organization where there's 50 to 100 people. You're surrounded by other men and women, and then you're working with these people and you're spending more time with them than your spouse. And then a relationship starts to develop because of all this time you're spending. Even though you still may care for your spouse, you get feelings for this person. That's where, if you can avoid that type of situation, then maybe you won't go out and cheat on your spouse as much. And then in cases where the family's not intimate anymore, they're not talking, they're going out and getting their emotional support from another person. And then that leads into intimate support as well.
Okay, well, I like that concept. establish high walls. Almost like you're saying, make it easy for yourself to be faithful, right?
That's right. That's right. I mean, if you're going to spend 40 hours a week with another person and then you start sharing all of your personal garbage during that period of time, and you're reaching out to each other and using each other for support, I mean, it's just, where do you think it's going to go? You've got to really be strong to resist that. And then for the most part, I find that we as humans are not strong when it comes to resisting, that type of temptation. Otherwise, I guess I wouldn't be so busy, right?
Right. Obviously. Speaking of being busy, did you notice more divorces during the lockdown? And has that changed? Because to me, it doesn't seem like, even though the lockdown happened in 2020, we're now sitting in January 2024. And it doesn't seem like we've returned to our culture of getting out of the house and being around community. Have you seen any shift in divorce or in your practice that you might attribute to this kind of new hunker down mentality that we all seem to have bought into?
I think it's a two-part situation, unfortunately. The first part is it leads to more domestic violence. You get people locked up together or spending time in the house, and if there's conflict and anger, then that gets even worse because you're not going somewhere else to cool down. Then I think it led to more domestic violence during the COVID period. I think it's leveling off a little bit now. People don't, I think this year they're predicting travel to be way up. So people are getting out a little bit more. And I think that's going to help and keep maybe some of the domestic violence down a little bit. But definitely divorce. There's definitely was more divorce then because people are nitpicking each other all the time. You're not getting away and you break. And then first thing you do with, like we were talking about before with the cancel culture or quietly quitting, you just get out of the relationship. You don't want to work on it anymore.
Okay, not only are people quiet quitting their job, they're quiet quitting their marriage.
Yeah, they just give up. Some people don't argue. They just stop having a relationship with that person. They just, ignore them. And you're basically a roommate at that point. And how fulfilling is that for anyone?
Yeah, not very. And then I think you throw social media in, and when everybody's got 1,000, I have 1,000 women in my pocket every day. And if I feel bad, I can go make a post and they're all, oh, you're so noble. You're so, now you're getting your validation from this little thing as opposed to maybe your spouse. Those are the kind of things I think about. Like just because being a social media expert, I deal with this thing all the time and I know how powerful it can be. And it scares me to think that my wife has 100 men every time she makes a post telling her how beautiful she is. What if she's mad at me one day and she just starts scrolling and reading those comments? And these are the kind of things that worry me about the state of marriage and social media and how our online lives intersect with our real life.
It definitely makes the world a lot closer. The whole world is connected a lot more with this social media. And we really need to look at social media for what it's for. It's a good way for us to keep up with people we know in our family and not to judge our own lives or feel bad about ourselves that we're not good enough because we don't live up to what these other people are doing. I think it's, if you can just keep in your mind, this is just entertainment, just a way to keep up with your friends and have fun. And then I don't think it's going to affect your marriage so bad.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you're comparing yourself, number one, to everyone's highlight reel, right? But also you might be looking at the top 1% marriage in the world and you're comparing your marriage to that, which may be a fine relationship, but it's going to look kind of like I'm in the fitness industry. And, if I were to compare myself to the top fitness experts in the world, I look out of shape. So yeah, the comparison aspect of social media can rob you of enjoying your marriage.
rob
Yeah,
you
you
of your
really,
self-esteem too, just to get off the top, not marriage, but self-esteem.
yeah,
You're not, I guess that could affect your marriage because you're depressed and you're feeling bad about yourself, and that impacts the way you're interacting with your spouse.
yeah. Or you're thinking, man, look at all these people on these happy vacations. Our marriage isn't working. We're not happy. And kind of like you said, yeah, they posed for that picture, but they were fighting an hour later. Yeah, uh, I get that. Well, I'm going to flash all of your contact info across the screen. It's been a great conversation. I appreciate you coming on, but tell us where we can reach you online if maybe we're in Houston and we have some family law issues to contend with.
Sure, you can reach out to us. Definitely, we can come by the office. We're at 440 Louisiana, Suite 977 in downtown Houston. You can give us a call, definitely, 832 759 5100. You can also just Google Longworth Law Firm, and then you'll have lots of choices. You'll be able to read some of our websites, some of our blogs. You can check out our reviews as well if you're interested in looking for a lawyer. I think it's important to read reviews. We can definitely see how other people felt that their lawyer treated them, and that's a very important factor when making that decision. So I would advise people to go ahead and do their due diligence.
Okay, Daryl, let me throw in, you have a fairly lively TikTok channel. A lot of questions asked on there.
Oh, yeah, I forgot to mention that. Sorry.
I'll flash all that on the screen. All right, but thanks for coming on. Glad you guys could join us for the show. Have a good one, everybody.
Thank you.